to find yourself and your identity and leave a legacy, you must go through 4 stages in your life. 4. Now, this is every person goes through some sort of this, okay? First off, when you start this world out, you start as mimicking. That's the first stage of your life. You do mimicking. And at first, you mimic your parents because you don't know any better, okay? All you see is them every day, all the time, so you mimic them. Your likes is their likes. And then you go off into school, and you realize, wait a minute, maybe I don't want to mimic them. Maybe I want to be like these kids. And you look at people who are maybe more popular or who are things seem to go a little bit easier for them. So you start looking at them. Hey, I want to be a little bit more like them. So over the next 10 to 18 years of your life, you focus on mimicking the ones who maybe are more popular or you just admire them at some point. It doesn't have to be people in your school. It could be people on TV that you admire. So 10 to 18 years of your life you spend trying to make yourself like them. And then in some sort of the process, you realize somehow I've lost myself in this. Somehow at some point, wait a minute, I don't really know if I want to be like them. Maybe I want to be like me, but wait a minute, who am I? So the next stage in your life is called self-discovery. And we learn our limits in this stage. This is a lot of times where, like guys, for instance, get hurt a lot. Or they don't want to test their limits. I think I can jump over that pond in this motorcycle. I think I can. You learn to test your limits. But you make a lot of choices. A lot of good choices, a lot of bad choices when it comes to that point in your life, in this self-discovery stage in your life. And so you're finding your limitations. This is important because you must eventually come to the realization that your timeless planet is limited. That's when self-discovery comes along. When you realize that, wait a minute, I'm not immortal. Like I can be hurt. You learn your limitations. And you realize that you only have so much time and that you should spend it doing things that matter more. So the next portion of your life, it's about commitment. And it's all about maximizing your own potential. So you know what your limits are now. Now you make a commitment to try to do something with those limitations. So you can get married, find somebody you love, and you settle down, and you have a family, and you commit to doing your best to raising those kids, or doing your best. Say you don't have a family, you do your best in your career. You know your limitations, you do your best you can in that portion. So you commit to doing something after you know your limitations. And so you learn your limits in your self-discovery stage, and then you push through to do your best in your career or your life. And then in this process of doing your best and raising your family, what you're doing is you're really building a legacy for your life. Because in that commitment portion, that's when your legacy comes in. Is that portion of people seeing what you've done and you leaving something behind, your legacy. And then the fourth stage actually is called legacy, but it's not about setting your legacy because we already talked about that. In the legacy stage of your life, it's about making sure your legacy keeps going on when you're in the latter part of your life. So that would be to kind of reinforcing those things. You've spent time with your kids or their kids now. Or if we're really focused on your career, but we didn't have a family, to focus in on making sure whatever things you help to establish or go on keeps going on. So those are the 4 stages of your life in learning your identity and leaving a legacy. Now, I'm sure you're thinking to yourself, what kind of goose chase are we on today? And I have a plan. I do have a plan for this, and I'm going to land it, I promise. But it's important you know those 4 stages. Okay? So I have some stuff to lay out for that. But we're going to start off with Paul, who actually grew up as Saul. You don't know that. All right? Saul was a Pharisee. And not only was he a Pharisee, but he was a son of a Pharisee. Acts 23:6 proves it when God uses him to minister to the Sadducees. When he was Paul, he was speaking to the Sadducees, as now he was a Christian at this point. He was speaking to them, and he was talking to them from the vantage point, I used to be like you. So in Acts 23:6, he shows that he was a Pharisee. Does anybody here remember what the Pharisees thought about Jesus? They didn't like him. What did they have done to Jesus? They crucified him. So they hated him and they crucified Jesus for this. So Saul, growing up in a Pharisee home, probably learned from his father to hate Christians, or this was also called the way. So that's what Saul, kind of home that Saul grew up in. That's what he mimicked, was his hatred for Christians. And so, as he grew up hating the Christians, Saul later ravaged the Christian church by entering homes of believers and committing them into prison. Saul's anti-Christian zeal is what motivated him not only to arrest and imprison the male Christians who were the leaders of the day, the ringleaders, so to speak, and you put it in his term, the ringleaders of his day, but he also arrested the female believers as well and imprisoned them. Saul wanted to set a legacy of his own, and that legacy, which he already had a pretty good way of starting, was Saul, the destroyer of Christians. That was his legacy, that he was going down the path. That was his main goal, was to leave that legacy to this earth, was that he was Saul, the destroyer of Christians. And then one day, right? Then one day, Acts 9, 1 through 19. Start off, Acts 9, 1. Right. Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He went to the high priest and asked him for the letters to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found anyone there who belonged to the way, which was the way was Christianity, whether they be men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Who are you, Lord? Asked Saul. I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting, he replied. Now, it's important to know here that this was after Jesus. This is after Jesus, this time period. So, Saul, this was about 35 years so after. So, all right. So, Saul said, who are you, Lord? And Jesus said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting, he replied. Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do. The men traveling with Saul stood there speechless. They heard the sound, but did not see anything. Saul got up from the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he could not see anything. So they led him by hand into Damascus. For 3 days he was blind and did not eat or drink anything. Now, the Lord reached out to someone in Damascus, and his name was Ananias. And he reached out to him because he wanted him to help Saul find his way. And Ananias was terrified because he had heard of Saul, and Ananias was a Christian. He was for the way. And so the Lord was asking Ananias to help this guy who murders and imprisons Christians. And in verse 13 it says, Lord, Ananias answered, I have heard many reports about this man and all the harm he has done to your holy people in Jerusalem. And he has come here with authority from the chief priests to arrest all who call your name. Verse 15, but the Lord said to Ananias, go, this man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and to their king and to the people of Israel. So absolutely, you can see Ananias' complete fear in this. He's about to help someone who is who has this name of murdering Christians. So he had to trust in God at this point. Now, once Saul had his encounter on the road and he had accepted the way of Christianity, he had been converted. His name changed to what? Paul. So we can say Paul from here on. And Paul, who once was Saul, is now known worldwide as one of the greatest Christian missionaries. His inspired writings cover a large portion of the New Testament, and it's safe to say that he remains one of the most read authors in human history. Because what is the most read book in the world? The Bible. And then Paul, if he was one of the most prominent writers in the New Testament, that would make that possible, wouldn't it? So that's quite a massive change in his life to go from his legacy being Saul, the destroyer of Christians, to now known as the greatest Christian missionary. Pretty incredible. Now, Paul abandons something, and he abandons his image of himself and to what other people thought of him and his current legacy. He abandoned his current legacy of being Saul, the destroyer of Christians. He abandoned all that to start all over, to start a new legacy. Now, in portion of, we talked about different stages in life, Paul was definitely in that commitment stage where he's trying to establish his legacy, which he had pretty much done a good job doing. So him starting over was kind of a big deal, portion of that, part of his life. But if you want to leave a lasting legacy on this earth, on this earth and to have a place in eternity, you must abandon any image of yourself that is not from God. Now, let that marinate for a second. You have an image of yourself. Other people have images of you. There's only one image that you should be concerned about. And is that, are you following the image that God has planned for your life? He has a specific plan, an image, and purpose for you. Are you following that? Do you know what that is? We're going to list some things here on what we should be thinking about to get to that point where your image is following God, what God's purpose is for your life. 1, you must stop accepting what others have said about you. Stop accepting that. Some things people have said about you that are not true, but because they've said it, you're starting to believe it. Stop accepting what others have said about you, how others have labeled you, and how others have defined you. Others, meaning not God, not yourself. You must start believing what God says about you. That is, He is pleased with what He has created. God created you. God has creatively designed this planet to turn, for the air to be breathable for us. That's not on other planets. He has intricately designed how plants give us air, and then they take our air and turn it into their heir. I mean, it's quite incredible. He has crafted this, and he has crafted you to have a purpose. And as I've heard my Aunt Tanya say, God don't make no junk. I think I've heard her say that quite a few times. You are not forever defined by your success or your failures. That's important. Because some people believe, well, I was very successful at doing this, so that must make me who I am. It's not true. Just because you were successful at something doesn't mean that's what you have to be. Also, same thing with your failures. Well, I have failed at this so many times. This must be who I am. It's not true. Don't believe it. You are not forever defined by the car you drive or the money you have or don't have or the house that you say you own, but really the bank owns. I mean, who really owns their house until like the latest part of their life? I mean, come on. You are defined by God and by God alone. He identifies you as his own. 2 Corinthians 1:22. He has set a seal of ownership upon us and put his Spirit in our hearts as a deposit, guaranteeing what is to come. He loves us. He made you. He made you for a reason. The thing is, if you don't know who you are, then you're vulnerable to what other people are telling you. You must know who you are, or else you will believe what other people tell you you are. This is important. If you don't realize your worth in God's eyes, then you will believe what other people say about you. That's the truth. But the concrete, solid gospel truth is that you are who God says you are. There's no one else on this planet or in this whatever who has a choice in the matter. You really are who God says you are. And you can deny that all day long, but you are who you are. You are God's precious child. And he has created you in a way that pleases him. No matter what phase of life you're in trying to discover your identity or leaving your legacy, you can still turn it around and give yourself over to Christ and begin living a life that has a meaningful legacy for you and for your family, but more importantly, to God. The life that he has planned for you, for your legacy to leave in this world, is for eternity, and it's never too late to make that decision. For some of you who don't know this, my birthday is tomorrow. Dun, dun, dun. All right, I'll be 35 years old. Never in my life did I picture myself being 35. Who pictures themselves being 35 when they're like 20? No one does. I mean, I can't imagine. But when I was 25, 10 years ago, when I started my company, I made like these goals that I wanted to be done by 35. This was a huge deal. I said I wanted to make my first million by the time I was 35. I've got news for you. I haven't made my first million. I haven't made my second million. I haven't made half of that. Okay? The other goal that I had for myself was that I would be famous in my industry. Famous. 10 years. That's what I gave myself. 10 years. And I can tell you, the Michael at 25 would have stopped at nothing to reach this goal. I was so selfish, I was almost accepting of losing everything to get what I wanted. Because it was all about me. And then, like Paul, I had a then one day moment. I made a choice to seek after the real me. And then when I found the real me, I didn't like what I found. I realized how incredibly selfish I was. Now, this was the hard part, the point of no return. This is that moment when you realize who you are and you don't like it. What do? You can either accept it, do something about it, or you could not do something about it, stay the same. I had to choose. I had to choose between being the same way that I was, or making myself the man of God, making myself a better man of God, becoming a better father, a better husband, or, continue down the path that I was going. Well, I'm standing here today to tell you that finding the real me, the man of God that I wanted to be, is not an easy road. It hasn't been an easy road. It's still not an easy road because I live in this place called the world. And I have temptations that knock on my door every single day. I have problems like you guys have. And I have to make it a choice. Do I take this way to help my family, or I take this way which I think is the right way, or what do I do? And but the path that I've taken of trying to be a better man of God, I'm leaving my children a legacy to be proud of. And I'm showing them what it means to live it. At least that's what I'm trying to do. And I can tell you, after my goal, my 10-year goal that I had for myself, it actually did come true. It actually did come true, sort of. It did. And this is how it happened. So, a few months, I had, once I turned my life over and started figuring out who I was and started on a better path, it wasn't easy. I did realize that I am a rich man. I am a rich man. Because of what I have. And because of some of the stuff I don't have in my life anymore. So I consider myself a rich man. That doesn't mean I'm a millionaire, by no means. But it does mean that I consider myself a rich man. Then, the second part of my little 10-year pledge to myself was to be famous. And of course, I knew that I'm not famous. But my daughter told me differently. I think it was in May. Or June, somewhere around that time. She said, Daddy, I never thought I would have a famous daddy. And I was tucking her in. I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, I am not famous. And she said, well, everyone likes you. And you just won this award. Which I won an award for some work that I'd done. She said, and that must make you famous. And then it dawned on me. It all came true. I am famous, at least to my children. And I am rich. And so, the two things that were most important to me did come true. And it was because I am decided to try to leave my family a legacy. And I encourage you to do the same. If you don't have a strong relationship with Christ in your life, that's the legacy you're going to leave, is that you don't have a strong relationship with Christ. Right now, you are building your legacy. What age you're in the room right now, at some point you are building your legacy. And most likely you're in that now. So I encourage you, think about your life. If you still haven't figured out who you are, figure that out. Make a point to figure out who you are, what your limitations are, and determine what legacy you want to leave. Dear God, I thank you for this day. I thank you for the opportunity that I have to be in your house, God, and to bring your word. Lord, I thank you for each person here. And I thank you for the opportunity to try to make a difference in this world, to leave a godlike legacy. God, be with us as we reflect upon our lives and determine what is our legacy. In your name we pray. Amen.